A pregnant woman receives $500 from a millionaire on Christmas Eve. What he discovers about her the next day leaves him speechless. Emily adjusted her worn coat over her 7-month pregnant belly, shivering against the cold wind blowing through the streets of London. At 30, she had never imagined spending Christmas Eve like this, alone, pregnant and penniless. The shop windows on Regent Street glittered with luxurious decorations as happy families passed by carrying bags of presents. Emily watched it all with a mixture of sadness and resignation. Just a few months ago, she too would be doing last-minute shopping, worrying about the Christmas dinner menu, and eager to see her loved ones' expressions as they opened their gifts. Now her only concern was surviving until the next day. A sudden flashback transported her back 3 months. Emily saw herself again in that cold human resources room, facing Ms. Smith, the HR manager, whose smile didn't reach her eyes. "I'm sorry, Emily, but your position is being restructured," Ms. Smith had said, her voice monotonous and rehearsed. "The company is going through changes, and unfortunately, your position no longer fits into our new structure." Emily felt her blood run cold. Restructured? But I was just promoted 6 months ago. My results are above target. Mrs. Smith looked away, a flicker of guilt crossing her face. "It's a corporate decision, Emily. There's nothing we can do." It was then that Emily understood. Her gaze instinctively fell to her belly, now visible under her fitted blazer. The realization hit her like a punch in the gut. "It's because of the pregnancy, isn't it?" Her voice trembled, a mixture of anger and disbelief. Mr. Smith's silence was answer enough. Emily stood up abruptly, ignoring the papers Ms. Smith tried to hand her. "This is illegal. You can't do this." "Emily, please be reasonable. We have a generous severance package here. If you sign, we guarantee a good reference and—" But Emily was already leaving the room, tears blurring her vision. She stormed through the office, ignoring the curious glances from her colleagues. Only when she reached the street, the cold autumn air hitting her face, did she allow herself to break down. Leaning against the wall of the imposing building that, minutes ago, was her workplace, Emily cried. She cried for the injustice, the betrayal, the fear of the uncertain future. Her hands trembled as she caressed her belly, a silent promise to the baby she didn't even know. "We'll be okay. Mommy will figure it out." The sound of a car horn brought her back to the present. Emily blinked, pushing away the painful memories. She was back on Regent Street, the Christmas spirit around her seeming to mock her situation. Her eyes landed on a small diner across the street. Emily's stomach growled, reminding her that she hadn't eaten anything since the previous morning. She reached into her pocket, counting the coins she had left, $2.75, not even enough for a decent coffee. With a resigned sigh, Emily crossed the street and entered the diner. The warmth and aroma of food hit her like a wave, making her stomach protest even louder. "A cup of hot water and a tea bag, please," she asked the waitress, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes. The waitress, Mary, according to her name tag, looked from Emily to her prominent belly, an expression of understanding crossing her face. "Honey, we have a Christmas special. Tea comes with a turkey sandwich, on the house for expectant mothers," Mary said with a knowing smile. Emily felt tears welling up. She wanted to refuse. Her pride screamed to refuse, but the baby kicked, as if begging her to accept. "Thank you," she whispered, sitting at a discreet table in the corner. As she ate slowly, savoring each bite of the sandwich as if it were her last, Emily did mental calculations. The rent was due in a week. Her savings would barely last a few more days. On her phone, another job rejection message blinked mercilessly. Finishing her meal, Emily thanked Mary again and stepped out into the approaching night's chill. Determined not to give up, she started walking down the street, her eyes alert for any help wanted and signs. Shop after shop, the same answer. "I'm sorry, we're not hiring at the moment." Or worse, the pitying look followed by a "leave your resume, we'll be in touch," that Emily knew would never happen. The sky darkened quickly, and the first snowflakes began to fall. Emily pulled her coat tighter around herself, feeling the tiredness weigh on her bones. She spotted a park bench and headed towards it, grateful to be able to rest her swollen feet. Sitting there, Watching the Christmas lights twinkle around her, Emily felt the full weight of her situation. She was alone, pregnant, jobless, and almost penniless on Christmas Eve. How had things gotten to this point? She caressed her belly, feeling the baby move in response. "Sorry, little one," she whispered, silent tears streaming down her face. "Mommy promised you a better life, and now—" Her voice failed. The baby kicked again, as if responding. Emily wiped away her tears with determination. She couldn't give up. Not now. Not with a life depending on her. "We'll figure it out," she promised, her voice low but firm. "I don't know how yet, but we'll make it. You'll have a roof over your head, food on the table, and all the love in the world. I promise." The snow was falling harder now, covering the city with a white blanket that seemed to want to erase all the world's problems. Emily knew it was an illusion. Her problems would be there in the morning, as urgent and frightening as before. But for a moment, she allowed herself to believe in the magic of Christmas. She got up from the bench, determined to try a few more shops before they closed. That's when she saw the black limousine slowly approaching through the snowy street. Emily didn't know it, but her destiny was about to change forever, all because of a chance encounter on Christmas Eve. The black limousine glided smoothly through the snow, stopping in front of Tiffany & Co. Richard Bennett adjusted his cashmere scarf before getting out of the vehicle. At 65, his posture exuded power and authority, the result of decades running one of the largest business conglomerates in the country. "I'll be back in 15 minutes, James," he instructed his driver, checking his Rolex on his wrist. "I just need to pick up my granddaughter's Christmas present." Richard was the personification of American corporate success. His impeccably cut grey hair matched his tailored Armani suit. Every detail of his appearance, from his Italian shoes to his luxury watch, screamed wealth and influence. He was about to enter the jewelry store when something caught his attention. A young woman sitting alone on a park bench, visibly shivering in the cold. His experienced eye immediately noticed the signs, the worn clothes, the expression of defeat, and most notably, the advanced pregnancy. Richard hesitated, his hand on the doorknob. Years of corporate life had taught him to be cautious, not to get involved. London was full of people asking for help, especially on Christmas Eve. Normally, he would walk by, making his donations through established institutions. But there was something different about this young woman. Perhaps it was the clothes, which, despite being worn, indicated someone who had seen better days. Or maybe it was the way she hugged her belly, a gesture that painfully reminded him of his late wife, Elizabeth, during her first pregnancy. Before he could stop himself, Richard found himself walking towards the bench. "Are you all right, miss?" he asked, his voice deep and kind. Emily looked up, meeting a distinguished gentleman with grey hair and an expensive suit. Instinctively, she recoiled on the bench. "I'm fine, thank you," she replied curtly. Years of living in London having taught her to be wary of strangers, especially rich men. Richard noticed the refined accent, the posture. This wasn't an ordinary homeless person. "Forgive my intrusion, but it's snowing heavily and you seem to need help," he insisted, keeping a respectful distance. It's not a night for an expectant mother to be alone on a park bench. Emily felt the baby kick, as if encouraging her to trust. It was strange. After months of closed doors and judgmental looks, encountering genuine kindness seemed almost surreal. "I'm just resting," she lied, but her voice faltered. Richard took off his scarf and offered it to her. "At least accept this. It's freezing out here." The unexpected gesture broke something inside Emily. Tears started to flow. "I'm sorry," she sobbed, accepting the scarf. "It's just, today has been a hard day. Actually, it's been a difficult few months." Richard sat down on the bench, maintaining a respectful distance. "Do you want to tell me about it?" The words poured out like a broken dam. Emily told him about being fired, her dwindling savings, the fruitless job search. She didn't mention the company or names, but Richard recognized the pattern. He had seen similar situations throughout his career. "How many months along are you?" he asked, indicating her belly. 7, Emily replied, a small smile appearing amidst the tears. "It's a boy." Richard took out his wallet, removing 5 $100 bills. "Please accept this," he offered. Emily's eyes widened, recoiling. "No, I can't." "You can and should," Richard interrupted gently. "Consider it a Christmas present for your son." "But it's a lot of money," Emily protested. "You don't even know me." Richard smiled, remembering something distant. 40 years ago, I was broke and desperate. A stranger helped me, changing my life. Today, $500 won't make a difference in my bank account, but it can make all the difference in your Christmas. Emily looked at the bills, her pride struggling against her need. The baby kicked again, hard. I promise to return it as soon as I can," she said, finally accepting the money with trembling hands. Richard removed a business card from his pocket. "Richard Bennett. If you need more help, look me up." Emily accepted the card, her eyes widening as she read the name, Bennett Enterprises, one of the largest corporations in the country. "Thank you, Mr. Bennett," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You don't know what this means." Richard stood up, adjusting his suit. "Just promise you'll take care of yourself, and take care of this little one." He returned to his limousine, casting one last look at Emily. Something about her intrigued him, a dignity that the cold and despair couldn't erase. "Home, and James," he instructed his driver, but his thoughts remained with the young woman on the bench. Emily watched the limousine drive away, holding the money and the card as if they were treasures. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to feel hope. She didn't know that this chance encounter in the snow would change not only her life, but also that of the powerful Richard Bennett. Fate had bigger plans for that Christmas Eve, plans that neither of them could imagine. The snow continued to fall, covering the city with a white blanket that seemed to want to erase the past and set the stage for a new beginning. Emily rose from the bench, renewed determination in her steps. With the money Richard had given her, she could spend the night in a decent hotel, buy nutritious food for herself and the baby, and maybe even print some resumes. As she walked along the snowy sidewalk, Emily couldn't help but think about the irony of the situation. Just a few months ago, she was a successful executive, making charitable donations. Now she was on the other side, receiving help from a stranger. Life had curious ways of teaching humility. In the limousine, Richard also reflected on the encounter. Something about Emily's story bothered him deeply. How could a clearly educated and capable woman end up in that situation? And why did he feel such a strong need to help her? "James," he called his driver, "tomorrow, I want you to find out everything you can about assistance programs for pregnant homeless women, and see if you can get information about recent layoffs in large tech companies." "Yes, sir," James replied, a slight tone of surprise in his voice. It wasn't common to see his boss so involved in personal matters. As the limousine drove away, Richard made a silent promise. He didn't know how or why, but he would help Emily. Maybe it was a Christmas impulse, or maybe it was the universe giving him a chance at redemption for years of focusing only on profits. Whatever the reason, he wouldn't let this opportunity to make a difference pass him by. The snow continued to fall on London, covering the streets with a white blanket that seemed to want to erase the past and set the stage for a new beginning. On that Christmas Eve, two strangers from completely different worlds had met. And in that brief moment of human connection, a spark of hope had been ignited, promising to light the way to an uncertain future, but one full of possibilities. Emily turned the key to room 304 in the small hotel on Lexington Avenue. It wasn't luxurious, but it was clean and warm, a paradise compared to the last few weeks sleeping on acquaintances' couches. The $500 weighed in her purse, along with Richard Bennett's card and the Burberry scarf that still exuded a faint masculine scent. The room was simple, a single bed, a small television, and a tiny bathroom. But for Emily, at that moment, it felt like the Ritz. She left her purse on the bed and went straight to the bathroom, her hands trembling with anticipation as she turned on the shower faucet. The hot water cascaded over her tense shoulders, and Emily allowed herself to cry, not from sadness this time, but from relief. She hadn't had a decent shower in 3 weeks, relying only on the gym bathroom where she still had a membership. "It's okay, little one," she whispered, caressing her belly under the hot water. We're going to be okay. After her shower, wrapped in the hotel's worn bathrobe, Emily sat on the bed and examined Richard Bennett's card. The paper was thick, elegant, with embossed gold lettering. Bennett Enterprises, a corporate empire she knew well from her market research. A flash of memory hit her. Her old apartment, 3 months ago. She was painting a small room light blue, wallpaper samples with stars and moons scattered on the floor. She had just received her promotion and could finally create the dream room for her baby. Now all that remained of those dreams were the photos on her phone. Picking up her phone, Emily dialed the number she knew by heart. "Sophia, it's me." "Emily, oh my God, I was worried. Where are you?" Her best friend's voice brought tears to her eyes. Sophia had offered her couch when Emily was evicted, but with 3 small children and a tiny apartment, it wasn't a viable solution. "I'm in a hotel," Emily replied. "Sophia, you won't believe what happened." Emily recounted her encounter with Richard, her voice alternating between disbelief and gratitude. $500 from a stranger. Sophia sounded alarmed. "Emily, are you sure there's nothing suspicious about this?" "No, Sophia. You had to see him. He reminded me of my dad, you know. That genuine kindness. Now still, be careful. New York is no place to trust strangers, no matter how rich or kind they seem." Emily smiled, grateful for her friend's concern. "He's Richard Bennett, from Bennett Enterprises. I looked it up online. It's legitimate." After hanging up, Emily took a notepad from the hotel and started doing calculations. With $500, she needed to be strategic. Prenatal vitamins, $40 1 week at the hotel, $280 food for 1 week, $100 emergency reserve, $80. It wasn't much, but it was a start. For the first time in weeks, Emily lay down in a real bed, exhaustion finally overcoming her. Across town, in his Upper East Side penthouse, Richard Bennett poured himself a scotch, his thoughts still on the young woman on the park bench. The 9,000-square-foot mansion felt strangely empty, as it always did on Christmas Eve since Elizabeth's death. His eyes landed on the photo above the fireplace, him and Elizabeth 40 years ago. She was pregnant with Michael, her eyes shining with happiness. Richard approached the photo, touching it gently. "You would have done the same thing, wouldn't you, Lizzie?" he murmured to the picture. The memory took him back to 1983. They were in this same apartment, recently purchased with the money that changed their lives. "I promise our family will never be in need," he had said, his hand on Elizabeth's belly. "I'm going to build an empire for our son." And he did. But at what cost? Michael had become a different man than he and Elizabeth had dreamed of. Cold, calculating, obsessed with profits over people. Richard picked up his phone, dialing a number. "Martha, sorry to call late. I need a favor. I want information on assistance programs for pregnant women in vulnerable situations. Yes, for tomorrow morning." He made a few more calls, his mind working through possibilities. Something about Emily's story bothered him. A qualified executive, fired during pregnancy. There was more to this story. The scotch remained untouched as Richard made notes. At some point, fatigue overcame him, and he fell asleep in his leather armchair, the phone still in his hand, Elizabeth's photo seeming to smile gently over him. Down in the city below, the snow continued to fall, covering both the modest hotel where Emily slept and Richard's luxurious penthouse. 2 such different lives, connected by a chance encounter that fate had carefully orchestrated. Emily dreamed of an uncertain future, but for the first time in months, that future didn't seem so scary. In her dream, she held a healthy baby in her arms, in a cozy room painted light blue. The feeling of security and hope was palpable, even in her sleep. Richard, in turn, tossed and turned restlessly in his armchair. His dreams were a mixture of memories: Elizabeth pregnant, Michael's birth, the first steps of his corporate empire. But intertwined with these memories was the image of Emily, alone on that park bench, her expression a mixture of despair and determination. When the sun rose on Christmas morning, it illuminated a city transformed by snow and 2 lives that had been irrevocably altered by a chance encounter. Emily woke up feeling renewed, ready to face the day with a strength she hadn't felt in months. Richard awoke with a clear mission in mind, determined to use his resources and influence to do more than just give money to a stranger. Fate had brought them together for a brief moment, but the ripples of that encounter would continue to spread, affecting not only their lives but potentially the lives of many others. The magic of Christmas, so often dismissed as mere sentimentality, had planted a seed of change in both of them. Now, it remained to be seen how that seed would blossom in the days, weeks, and months to come. Emily awoke with the first rays of sun filtering through the hotel window. For the first time in weeks, she felt truly rested and refreshed. The baby stirred, as if sharing her optimistic awakening. "Merry Christmas, little one," she whispered, caressing her belly. "Let's make this a new beginning for us." She dressed quickly, eager to seize the day. The streets were almost deserted, the snow from the previous night creating a postcard landscape. Emily took a deep breath of the cold air, feeling strangely hopeful. Her first stop was a small market that remained open on the holiday. Carefully, she selected nutritious foods, fresh fruits, vegetables, lean proteins, each item chosen with the baby in mind. At the pharmacy, she bought the prenatal vitamins she hadn't been able to afford for weeks. The pharmacist, noticing her advanced pregnancy, offered a kind smile and wished her a Merry Christmas. Leaving the pharmacy, Emily noticed a stationery store. Impulsively, she went in and bought a hardcover notebook. It would be her new beginning, where she would plan her future. With her shopping done, she allowed herself a small luxury. She stopped at a cozy cafe. The smell of coffee and freshly baked pastries enveloped her. "A decaf chai latte and a blueberry muffin, please," she ordered, savoring the normalcy of the moment. Sitting by the window, Emily opened her new notebook. The blank pages seemed full of possibilities. She began to write. Look for shelters for pregnant women. Check government assistance programs, update resume, call former professional contacts. As she wrote, she felt the weight of the last few months slowly dissipating. She had a plan. She had resources. She could do this. Across town, Richard Bennett awoke in his armchair, his neck stiff from the uncomfortable position. Elizabeth's photo seemed to watch him with a mixture of affection and disapproval. I know, he murmured to the picture. "I'm too old to be sleeping in armchairs." But his physical discomfort was secondary. His mind was focused on a mission: to find Emily. "James," he called his driver through the intercom, "get the car ready. We have a long journey today." Over the next few hours, Richard traveled the streets of Manhattan, stopping at every charity and shelter he could find. At each stop, the same question: have you seen a young pregnant woman named Emily? Frustration grew with each negative response. The bureaucracy, the lack of communication between institutions, the evident scarcity of resources, it all irritated him deeply. "How does anyone get help in this system?" he questioned aloud after another fruitless attempt. His driver, James, who had served him for decades, dared to reply, "Perhaps that's why so many depend on the kindness of strangers, sir." Richard reflected on those words. He had always believed in institutional charity, in systems and structures. But now, confronted with the reality of the streets, he perceived the flaws in that thinking. He decided to change his strategy. He began visiting modest hotels in the area, showing a description of Emily. At each reception, the same negative response. Meanwhile, Emily returned to her hotel room, arms laden with her purchases. She carefully organized the items, each one representing a small victory. She picked up the phone and called Sophia. "You won't believe it," she said excitedly. "I spent the day planning. I think I have a real chance to turn things around." Sophia listened as Emily detailed her plans. Her voice betrayed a mixture of relief and concern. "I'm happy for you, Emily. But what if the money runs out? What if you don't get a job in time?" Emily took a deep breath. "Garth and I'll deal with it when it happens. But now, for the first time in months, I feel like I have options." They discussed possible job opportunities. Sophia promised to activate her network of contacts, looking for any vacancy that might be suitable for Emily. As night fell, Richard returned to his mansion, exhausted and frustrated. He hadn't found any sign of Emily. "First, maybe I should just let it go," he murmured to himself. But he knew he couldn't. The image of the young pregnant woman on the park bench haunted him. He sat in his office, surrounded by phones and computers, the tools of his corporate empire. Now he would use these resources for a personal search. "Martha," he called his assistant, "I need you to activate our contacts." Discreetly. "We're looking for a young woman named Emily, 7 months pregnant, probably recently unemployed." As he gave instructions, Richard felt a determination he hadn't experienced in years. This went beyond simple charity. It was a mission. Finally exhausted, Richard retired to his room. Before sleeping, he looked once more at Elizabeth's photo. "I won't give up, Lizzie," he promised. "I'll find her and help her. It's what you would do." In their respective corners of the city, Emily and Richard fell asleep. She, hopeful for the possibilities the new day would bring. He, determined to find her, driven by a compulsion he didn't even fully understand. Fate, which had briefly united them on Christmas Eve, worked silently, setting the stage for the next act of this unexpected story. The following day would bring revelations that neither of them could anticipate. Emily adjusted her coat over her prominent belly and left the hotel as soon as the sun rose. The cold morning air made her shiver, but there was a determination in her steps that hadn't been there for months. With a handful of resumes in hand, she began her job search. Store after store, cafe after cafe, Emily entered with a hopeful smile, only to leave minutes later with an increasingly discouraged expression. The answers were always the same: "We're not hiring at the moment," or "Leave your resume, we'll get in touch." Emily knew that most of those resumes would end up in the trash as soon as she walked out the door. After 2 hours of fruitless attempts, Emily realized she was running out of copies. She decided to use some of the money Richard had given her to print more. She spotted a small print shop on the corner and, adjusting her purse on her shoulder, headed there. The door chime jingled as Emily entered. The smell of paper and ink enveloped her, bringing back memories of her corporate life not so long ago. She was so absorbed in her thoughts that she almost didn't notice the man with his back to her, leaning over the counter. Richard Bennett was focused, reviewing the proofs of the flyers he had ordered printed. Each one had a picture of Emily, discreetly taken by security cameras in the square where he had met her, along with a message: "Have you seen this woman? Please contact us." The sound of the chime made him turn, more out of reflex than real interest. It was then that his eyes widened in shock and relief. "Emily!" His voice was a mixture of disbelief and joy. Emily froze, immediately recognizing Richard. For a moment, she considered turning around and leaving, but something kept her there. Perhaps it was the genuine concern in his eyes, or maybe it was simply the exhaustion of running from her reality. "Mr. Bennett," she replied, her voice trembling. I didn't expect to see you here." Richard approached, careful not to frighten her. "I spent yesterday looking for you. I was worried." Emily frowned, suspicion evident in her gaze. "Looking for me? Why? You barely know me." It was then that she noticed the flyers in Richard's hand. Her face paled as she saw her own image printed. "What is this?" she asked, her voice a mixture of fear and indignation. "Why do you have pictures of me here?" Richard realized his mistake, quickly putting the papers aside. "Emily, I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure you were okay. So after that night, I couldn't stop thinking about whether I had done enough." The sincerity in his voice made Emily hesitate. Part of her wanted to run, to protect herself from further disappointments. But another part, a part that hadn't manifested itself for a long time, felt touched by this stranger's genuine concern. "Look," Richard continued, his voice soft, "I know this seems strange, probably scary, but I swear my intentions are good. How about we go to a coffee shop nearby? We can talk better, in a public place. You choose the place." Emily pondered for a moment, weighing her fears against the possibility of real help. Finally, she nodded. "Okay. But I choose the place, and if I feel uncomfortable at any time, I'm leaving." "Absolutely," Richard agreed, relief evident in his voice. Minutes later, they were sitting in a small coffee shop across the street. Emily chose a table near the window, surrounded by other customers, a precaution that didn't go unnoticed by Richard. After placing their orders, a chai latte for Emily and a black coffee for Richard, a tense silence settled between them. It was Emily who finally broke the silence. "Why do you care so much? You're a rich and busy man. Why waste time with a pregnant, homeless stranger? Richard took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. Honestly, at first, it was impulse. You reminded me of my wife, Kjors Elizabeth, when she was pregnant with our son. But then it was about doing the right thing, about not turning your back when you can help. Emily studied him, looking for signs of falsehood, but finding only sincerity. Slowly, like a dam breaking, she began to speak. I had a promising career, she began, her voice low but firm. I was a marketing manager at a tech company. I was about to be promoted to director when I found out I was pregnant. She paused, taking a sip of her chai. At first, everyone seemed happy for me, but then things changed. Important projects were passed over. Meetings took place without my presence. And then, 3 months ago, I was called to HR. Richard listened attentively, his face a mask of empathy and growing indignation. They said my position was being restructured. Emily continued, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. But I knew the truth. It was the pregnancy. They didn't want to deal with a director on maternity leave. That's illegal, Richard commented, his voice laden with contained anger. Emily nodded. It is, but fighting them would mean a long and expensive lawsuit. A lawsuit I couldn't afford, especially with a baby on the way. Richard was silent for a moment, processing everything he had heard. When he finally spoke, his voice was filled with determination. Emily, I want to help, not out of pity or charity, but because it's the right thing to do. I have contacts in several companies. I can make some calls, try to find a place that values your talent, pregnancy or not. Emily stared at him, a visible battle in her eyes between hope and distrust. Say, why would you do that? What do you gain from this? Richard smiled gently. Peace of mind, perhaps. The satisfaction of making a difference. Or maybe I'm just an old fool trying to make up for years of focusing only on profits and not on people. After a long moment, Emily slowly nodded. Okay, I'll consider your offer. But I don't promise anything. They exchanged phone numbers, the moment laden with a weight that both felt but couldn't fully name. When they said goodbye at the door of the cafe, Emily felt a strange mix of emotions, hope, caution, and something else she couldn't define. Richard watched her leave, her figure receding down the busy sidewalk. A determination solidified in his chest. He didn't know why, but he felt that helping Emily was more than just a good deed. It was a calling, a chance at redemption that he didn't know he needed. As he returned to his limousine, Richard was already making plans, a mental list of contacts to activate. Fate had brought them together again, and this time he wouldn't let the opportunity pass. Emily deserved a chance, and he would do everything possible to ensure she got it. Emily's phone rang while she was reviewing job ads in her hotel room. The number was unfamiliar, but something made her answer. Hello? Emily? It's Richard Bennett. Her heart skipped a beat. Since their encounter at the print shop, Emily hadn't been able to stop thinking about Richard's offer of help. Mr. Bennett, hello. How can I help you? I'd like to invite you to a meeting at my office. I have a proposition that might interest you. Emily hesitated, her mind racing. What kind of proposition? I'd prefer to discuss it in person, tomorrow, at 10 a. Tad, would that be convenient? After a moment of reflection, Emily agreed. Curiosity overcame her apprehension. The next morning, Emily found herself in front of the imposing Bennett Enterprises building. The lobby was a sea of marble and glass, hurried executives circulating with their leather briefcases and determined looks. An impeccably dressed receptionist led her to the executive elevator. Mr. Bennett is waiting for you on the 50th floor. Richard's office was an impressive blend of corporate power and good taste. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Manhattan. Modern artwork adorned the walls, contrasting with the dark wood furniture. Richard rose from his imposing desk, a warm smile on his face. Emily, welcome. Please sit down. He guided her to a seating area with leather sofas, where a tray with coffee, tea, and cookies awaited them. I hope you found the office easily, Richard commented, pouring her a cup of tea. Emily nodded, trying to hide her nervousness. It's a hard building to miss. Richard smiled, Then his face took on a more serious expression. "Emily, since our last meeting, I've been thinking a lot about your situation, and I believe I have a proposition that could benefit both of us." Emily sat up straighter, her curiosity piqued. "I'd like to offer you a position in our company," Richard continued. "A consulting position in corporate social responsibility." Emily blinked, stunned. "I'm sorry, I don't think I understand," Richard went on, detailing the offer. "A generous salary, full benefits including a premium health plan and extended maternity leave, plus the flexibility to work from home after the baby's birth." "But why?" Emily finally managed to articulate, her mind reeling with the possibilities. Richard leaned forward, his eyes serious. "Emily, in the last few days, the more I thought about your situation, the more I realized that it's symptomatic of a larger problem in our corporate society. Companies treating employees like disposable parts, especially women in vulnerable situations." He paused, taking a sip of his coffee. "I want to change that, starting with my own company. And I believe that you, with your experience and, frankly, with what you've been through, would be the perfect person to lead this change." Emily felt a mix of emotions: hope, fear, disbelief. "Mr. Bennett, I'm flattered, but I have some concerns." Richard nodded, encouraging her to continue. "First, I don't want it to seem like I'm taking advantage of your kindness. Second, I don't have specific experience in corporate social responsibility. And third, what will your other employees think? A pregnant stranger coming in and taking on a leadership position?" Richard listened attentively, then addressed each point. "Emily, this offer isn't charity. It's an investment in someone I believe has the potential to make a real difference. As for experience, we'll provide all the necessary training. You'll have time to adapt and learn. And about the other employees, leave that to me. I have the board's full support on this decision." Emily was silent for a moment, absorbing everything. It was an incredible opportunity, a chance not only to rebuild her life, but to do something meaningful. Can I have some time to think?" she finally asked. Richard smiled, understandingly. "Of course, take a week. Think it over. Talk to whoever you need to. The offer will still stand." When Emily left the office, her mind was filled with possibilities and doubts. Part of her wanted to accept immediately, to seize this chance with both hands. Another part feared it was too good to be true, that there was some hidden catch. In the elevator, she caressed her belly, a practice that had become a comforting habit. "What do you think, little one?" she whispered. Should we trust him?" The baby responded with a kick, as if saying, "Go for it, Mum." Emily smiled, feeling a determination grow within her. Maybe it was time to stop expecting the world to be fair and start creating her own justice. And maybe, just maybe, this was the perfect opportunity to do just that. Stepping out of the imposing Bennett Enterprises building, Emily felt the winter sun on her face. For the first time in months, the future didn't seem like a dark and scary road. There was light on the horizon, a chance for a new beginning. Emily knew she had an important decision to make, but at that moment, she allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. True and pure hope. In the days following Richard's proposal, Emily immersed herself in intense research on Bennett Enterprises. Every article, every financial report, every corporate news item was meticulously analyzed. It was during this investigation that her world turned upside down once more. In an obscure press release from 6 months prior, Emily saw something that made her heart stop. Bennett Enterprises had acquired Tech Innovate, the company that had unjustly fired her. The realization hit her like a thunderbolt. She had been fired by the very company that was now offering her a job. "It can't be a coincidence," Emily murmured, feeling a mixture of anger and disbelief. Did Richard know? Was this all an elaborate attempt to cover up a past mistake? Determined to get answers, Emily scheduled another meeting with Richard. This time, as she entered the imposing Bennett Enterprises building, there was no nervousness, only steely resolve. Richard greeted her with a warm smile, which quickly faded as he noticed Emily's serious expression. "Did something happen?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. Emily went straight to the point. Mr. Bennett, the company that unjustly fired me during my pregnancy, was a subsidiary of Bennett Enterprises. The shock on Richard's face seemed genuine. How? Emily, I had no idea. It's true, Emily continued, her voice trembling slightly. I was fired by Tech Innovate, which your company acquired 6 months ago. I need to know, Mr. Bennett, is this job offer just an attempt to cover up a past mistake? Richard sank heavily into his chair, visibly disturbed. Emily, I swear I didn't know about this. In recent years, I've been less involved in day-to-day management. Acquisitions, they go through several levels before they reach me. He paused, taking a deep breath. But that's no excuse. I should know what's happening in my own company. Please, tell me everything. Emily then shared every detail of her dismissal, the meetings she was excluded from, the projects passed over, the cold conversation in HR. Richard listened attentively, his face a mixture of anger and shame. This is unacceptable, Richard declared when Emily finished. Far completely against everything I believe in and everything this company should stand for. He stood up, walking to the window. After a moment of reflection, he turned to Emily. I want to propose something. Not only do I maintain my job offer, but I'd like you to lead an internal investigation into what happened. More than that, I want you to head a new labor ethics committee. Emily blinked, marked as surprised by the proposal. An ethics committee? Yes. Richard nodded emphatically. We need significant changes in our policies, and who better to lead this than someone who has lived through the consequences of our failures? Emily considered the proposal. It was an opportunity to prevent others from going through the same thing she did, but there were still doubts. What if I discover things the company doesn't want to come to light? She questioned. Will I have real autonomy to implement changes? Richard didn't hesitate. Total autonomy. I want complete transparency. You'll have unrestricted access to documents and employees. And to ensure impartiality, we'll hire an external audit firm to monitor the process. Emily felt a mix of emotions: hope, skepticism, determination. Why are you doing this, Mr. Bennett? Why risk exposing your own company? Richard smiled sadly. Because it's the right thing to do. Because I built this empire to make a difference in the world, not to be another soulless corporation. And because, Emily, your story made me realize how far I've strayed from those ideals. After a long moment of reflection, Emily extended her hand. All right, Mr. Bennett, I accept to lead this investigation and the ethics committee. But on one condition, nothing will be swept under the rug. If we find irregularities, they will be dealt with openly. Richard shook her hand firmly. You have my word. We'll do this the right way, no matter the consequences. As she left the office, Emily felt the weight of the responsibility she had just assumed. It wouldn't be easy. There would be resistance, obstacles, perhaps even threats. But for the first time in months, she felt she was on the right path. We're doing the right thing, little one, she whispered, stroking her belly. We're going to change things, not just for us, but for everyone who comes after. The baby responded with a kick as if in agreement. Emily smiled, determined. The road ahead would be challenging, but she was ready to face it. After all, she was no longer fighting just for herself, but for a better future for her son and for all workers facing similar injustices. As the elevator descended, Emily made a silent promise. She would use this opportunity not only to rebuild her life, but to create real and lasting change. The journey would be difficult, but she was ready for every step of the way. Emily adjusted the nameplate on her desk. Emily Thompson, Director of Ethics and Investigation. The title still seemed surreal, considering that just a few weeks ago, she was sleeping on a park bench. Her new office, and though modest compared to Richard's, was spacious and well lit, overlooking bustling downtown Manhattan. In the first few days, Emily carefully assembled her team. She chose people from different departments and hierarchical levels, seeking a diversity of perspectives. Among them, a young idealistic lawyer, a sharp data analyst, and an HR veteran known for her integrity. Walking through the halls of Bennett Enterprises, Emily felt the curious glances and heard the whispers. It's her, the pregnant woman Richard hired. I heard she was homeless. Why is she investigating the company? At the team's first meeting, Emily was direct. Our mission is clear: to investigate discriminatory practices, especially against pregnant women and mothers. We will be thorough, impartial, and above all, confidential. We are not here to witch hunt, but to uncover the truth and propose changes. The interviews began the next day. The first was with Ms. Smith, the head of HR who had fired Emily. "Miss Thompson, I didn't expect to see you again," Miss Smith stammered, visibly uncomfortable. Emily remained professional. "Ms. Smith, I need to understand the process that led to my dismissal. Who made the final decision?" Ms. Smith hesitated. "It was a collective decision of the board. I just followed orders." The next interview was with Melissa, Emily's former colleague. "We all knew it was wrong," Melissa confessed, tears in her eyes, "but we were afraid to speak up. The culture here, it's not favorable to those who question." The manager who approved Emily's dismissal, Robert Dees, was more defensive. "It was a matter of efficiency," he argued. "We couldn't have a director absent for months," Emily pressed, "and hiring and training someone new would be more efficient." Robert looked away without answering. Regularly, Emily met with Richard to discuss progress. His expression oscillated between shock and deep disappointment. "How did I let this happen in my own company?" he lamented on one occasion. "Mr. Bennett, we need access to more records," Emily requested. "There's a pattern emerging and it's not pretty." Richard didn't hesitate. "Whatever it takes, Emily. Spare no effort." As the investigation progressed, a grim picture began to form. Emily discovered that hers was not an isolated case. In the last 5 years, 17 pregnant women had been fired or encouraged to leave. The discrimination was subtle, but systematic. Each new discovery was like reliving her own trauma. At night, Emily often called Sophia, seeking emotional support. "It's hard, Sophia," she vented one night. "Every story I hear, it could have been me." "You're doing the right thing, Emily," Sophia reassured her. "You're giving a voice to those who didn't have a chance to defend themselves." The turning point came 3 weeks after the investigation began. Emily was reviewing corporate emails when she found a message that made her blood run cold. It was from Michael Bennett, CEO and Richard's son, to the department heads. "Gentlemen, our numbers are great, but we can do better. I suggest discouraging female employees who may become, let's say, less productive in the coming months. Be creative, but discreet." Emily reread the email several times, incredulous. This went beyond discrimination. It was a deliberate policy coming from the top. She spent the entire night preparing a detailed report, charts, testimonials, emails. Everything pointed to a toxic corporate culture that prioritized profits over people. The next morning, with dark circles under her eyes but determination in her gaze, Emily scheduled an urgent meeting with Richard. Back in her small rented apartment, a luxury compared to the park bench, but modest by her previous standards, Emily allowed herself a moment of reflection. She caressed her prominent belly, thinking about the future that awaited her son. "Am I doing the right thing?" she whispered to the baby. "What if Richard doesn't believe me? What if all this is in vain?" The baby responded with a kick, as he always did when she was agitated. Emily smiled sadly. "You're right, little one. We can't stay silent. It's not just for us. It's for all the women who have gone through this and for all those who will come after." Lying in bed, Emily thought about all the stories she had heard in recent weeks. Brilliant women forced to choose between career and family. Dreams interrupted. Lives forever altered by cold corporate decisions. "Tomorrow we change all that," Emily promised, feeling the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. She fell asleep with one protective hand on her belly and the other holding the report that could change the course of Bennett Enterprises. Tomorrow would be a decisive day, not just for Emily, but for the future of countless working women. Sleep came, restless but determined. In her dreams, Emily saw a future where no woman would have to choose between being a mother and having a career. A future she was determined to make a reality, no matter the obstacles she would have to face. The silence in the conference room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Emily, at 30 and 7 months pregnant, stood, her hands trembling slightly as she held a folder of documents. Her eyes, a mixture of determination and fear, shifted between Richard and Michael Bennett. Richard, 65, seated at the head of the table, wore an expression of growing concern. His grey eyebrows were furrowed, creating deep lines on his forehead. He could sense that something was wrong, very wrong. Michael, normally the epitome of corporate confidence, seemed out of place. His eyes darted nervously between his father and Emily, his hands fidgeting under the table. Emily took a deep breath, summoning all her courage. "Richard," she began, her voice initially shaky but gaining strength with each word, "there's something you need to know about your son and the reason for my dismissal." Richard's piercing gaze immediately turned to Michael, a silent question hanging in the air. Michael tried to intervene, his voice betraying his nervousness. "Dad, it's not what you think." But Emily interrupted him, her voice now firm and clear. "Michael is the father of my child." The revelation landed like a bomb in the room. Richard visibly staggered, his hand seeking support on the nearest chair. Michael paled, words of denial dying on his lips before they could even be uttered. Emily remained standing, one hand protectively over her prominent belly, as if wanting to shield her baby from the maelstrom she had just unleashed. Richard was the first to break the stunned silence. "Michael," his voice was low, but charged with emotion. "Is this true? How could you do this?" Then, turning to Emily, "And you, why didn't you tell me this before?" Emily felt the weight of both their gazes upon her. I didn't know how," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "It all happened so fast. Michael and I had a brief relationship a few months ago. When I found out I was pregnant, I told him immediately." She paused, swallowing hard before continuing. "His reaction was not what I expected. He panicked, said it would ruin his career, his reputation. There were veiled threats. And then, suddenly, I was called to HR and fired." Michael, cornered by the exposed truth, finally found his voice. I panicked," he admitted, his usual arrogance completely absent. "Everything I'd worked to build, my position in the company, everyone's expectations, I couldn't let an unplanned pregnancy ruin all of that." Richard looked at his son, as if seeing him for the first time. "So you used your position to force Emily's dismissal? To cover up your own mistakes?" Michael nodded miserably. "I was afraid of disappointing you, Dad, of ruining everything you've built." Richard stood up abruptly, walking to the window. His silhouette was outlined against the Manhattan skyline, his shoulders visibly heavy. "How could I not have noticed this happening in my own company?" he murmured, more to himself than to the others. Turning, he faced Michael. "Do you have any idea of the damage you've caused, not just to Emily, but to everything we've built, to all our values?" Emily, observing the dynamic between father and son, felt an unexpected pang of empathy. She could see the crushing weight of expectations that Michael carried, the fear of disappointing such a successful father. At the same time, the look of deep disappointment and pain in Richard's eyes was palpable. After a moment that seemed like an eternity, Richard resumed his leadership posture. His voice was firm when he announced, "Michael, you are temporarily suspended from your duties at the company. We need to fully assess the impact of your actions." Michael tried to argue, but Richard silenced him with a stern look that brooked no argument. Turning to Emily, Richard continued, his voice softer. "Emily, I sincerely apologize for what happened. I'd like the opportunity to rectify this mistake." Emily, taken aback by Richard's reaction, felt a mixture of relief and distrust. "Why should I trust you or your company now?" she questioned. "How can I be sure this isn't just an attempt to avoid a scandal?" Richard approached her, his eyes conveying palpable sincerity. Because at 65, Emily, I've realized what kind of legacy I want to leave. And it's not this." He gestured, encompassing the situation. "I want to correct the mistakes of the past and build something better for the future. Not just for you and your son, but for all the employees of this company." Silence fell over the room again, each person lost in their own thoughts. Emily, with one hand still protectively on her belly, pondered whether she could trust Richard's promises. After all, she had already been betrayed once by this family. Michael, sitting in his chair, seemed to have aged years in just a few minutes. The weight of his actions and their consequences finally hit him in all its magnitude. Richard, in turn, displayed a renewed determination. He knew he had a long way to go to correct the mistakes made, not only by his son, but by the entire culture that had allowed such actions to occur in his company. The future, which just minutes ago had seemed so clear to each of them, was now shrouded in uncertainty. The decisions they would make next would shape not only their individual lives, but potentially the future of all of Bennett Enterprises. Emily was the first to break the stalemate. "I need time," she said, her voice low but firm. "Time to think, to process all of this." Richard nodded understandingly. "Take all the time you need, Emily. My offer of help remains, without conditions." As Emily prepared to leave the room, she cast one last glance at Michael. Their eyes met briefly, a myriad of unspoken emotions passing between them. Then, straightening her shoulders, Emily walked out, leaving father and son to deal with the consequences of their actions. The door closed behind her with a soft click, but the sound reverberated in the room like a cannon shot, marking the end of one era and the uncertain beginning of another. The morning was grey when Emily entered the imposing Bennett Enterprises building. Dressed in a stylish maternity suit, she exuded a confidence that contrasted with the vulnerability of her previous visits. Her heart raced, but her resolve was unshakable. Richard's office was silent when she entered. He rose to greet her, his face a mask of regret and resolution. Michael sat in a corner, nervously shuffling some papers, avoiding Emily's gaze. "Emily, thank you for coming," Richard began, indicating a comfortable armchair. "We have much to discuss." Emily nodded, sitting down carefully, one hand instinctively protecting her belly. Richard took a deep breath before continuing. "Emily, I want to offer you not only your job back, but a leadership position in the company. I believe your experience and integrity are exactly what we need right now." Surprise registered on Emily's face. Why me?" she questioned, her voice a mix of disbelief and suspicion. "After everything that's happened, how can I trust this company? Isn't this just an attempt to silence me?" Richard leaned forward, his eyes conveying sincerity. "I understand your distrust, Emily, and you have every right to feel it, but I'm proposing more than just a job. I want a complete overhaul of this company's culture, and I believe you're the right person to lead that change." He then detailed his plans. A new ethics and social responsibility department, led by Emily, with the autonomy to implement policies and practices that guaranteed fairness and equality for all employees. The package included generous compensation and extensive pregnancy and maternity benefits. Emily listened attentively, her mind working to process the surprising proposal. It was then that Michael, finally finding his voice, intervened. "Emily," he began, his voice trembling, "I know my words may mean little now, but I want to sincerely apologize for what I did. It was cowardly and unforgivable." He paused, swallowing hard. "I'm willing to step down from my leadership position in your favor, and I want to take responsibility for our child." The silence that followed was heavy. Emily felt a storm of emotions: vindication for Michael's admission of guilt, temptation at the opportunity to create real change, and yet a lingering distrust and fear. Richard, sensing Emily's hesitation, made an additional proposal. "Emily, I understand this is a lot to process. How about a 6-month probationary period? You'll have full autonomy to implement the changes you deem necessary. If at the end of that period you decide you don't want to continue, you'll have a generous exit clause." Emily closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. When she opened them, there was a new resolve in her gaze. "All right," she began, her voice firm. I accept your offer, Richard, but with conditions." She turned to Michael. "As for you, I appreciate your apology, but we'll need to establish clear boundaries regarding your involvement with the baby. This will be discussed separately, with legal mediation if necessary." Turning back to Richard, she continued, "I demand full transparency and support in implementing the new policies. Any resistance or obstruction will be dealt with severely, and I want a public announcement detailing these changes." Richard nodded, a small smile of approval on his lips. "I agree to all the terms, Emily. You'll have my full support." Michael, looking simultaneously relieved and apprehensive, agreed. I accept your leadership, Emily, and I respect your decision about our son." The meeting concluded with a tentative agreement. Richard committed to preparing the public announcement of the changes, while Michael accepted a reduced role in the company under Emily's direct supervision. As Emily rose to leave, she felt the weight of the responsibility she had just assumed. It was more than a job. It was a chance to reshape an entire company, to create a fair work environment for hundreds of people. At the door, she paused and looked back. Richard and Michael were engaged in a serious conversation, their postures indicating the end of one era and the beginning of another. Emily touched her belly, making a silent promise to her son. "We're going to change things, little one," she whispered. "Time for you, for me, and for everyone who comes after us." As the elevator descended, Emily allowed herself a moment of reflection. The road ahead would be challenging, full of obstacles and, likely, resistance. But for the first time in months, she felt she was in control of her destiny. The elevator doors opened to the bustling lobby. Emily straightened her shoulders and walked purposefully towards the exit. Outside, the grey sky was beginning to brighten, as if reflecting the change in her own life. She had a lot of work ahead of her, policies to review, teams to assemble, an entire culture to transform. But Emily was ready, not just for herself, but for all the women who had faced similar injustices, and for all those who would come after. As she walked down the busy street, Emily felt her baby move. A soft smile touched her lips. "Yes, little one," she murmured. "We're starting a new chapter, and this time, we're writing our own story." The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, Emily faced it not with fear, but with determination. She had a chance to make a difference, to turn a personal tragedy into a collective triumph. And she was determined not to waste that opportunity. With each step she took, Emily felt stronger, more resolute. The road ahead would be difficult, but she was ready to face it. After all, she was no longer fighting just for herself, but for a better future for her son and for all workers facing similar injustices. The city pulsed around her, indifferent to the silent revolution about to begin within one of its largest corporations. But Emily knew, from that day forward, nothing would be the same, and she would be at the forefront of that change, leading the way to a more just and equitable future. As she turned the corner, heading for the subway, Emily made one last promise to herself. No matter what came, she would remain true to her values, to her integrity. Because in the end, that's what really mattered. Not power, not the title, but the ability to look her son in the eyes and say, "I did what was right." With that thought, Emily plunged into the crowd, ready to face any challenge the future might bring. A new era was beginning, and she was determined to shape it with her own hands. 3 months had passed since Emily assumed her new position at Bennett Enterprises. Now 7 months pregnant, she stood before the board of directors, her presence commanding attention and respect. "Ladies and gentlemen," Emily began, her firm voice echoing through the conference room, "the results speak for themselves. Our employee satisfaction rate has increased 30% since the implementation of the new policies." She moved to the next slide of her presentation, revealing impressive graphs. "Today, I propose we take the next step, an equal parental leave policy and flexible work options for all employees." A murmur ran through the room. Emily noticed the skeptical expressions of some of the older executives. From the corner of her eye, she saw Richard nod encouragingly. "This will cost a fortune," protested Mr. Johnson, a long-time CFO. "Not to mention the drop in productivity." Emily smiled, anticipating the objection. "On the contrary, Mr. Johnson, studies show that generous family policies increase talent retention and productivity in the long run. Let me show you the numbers." As Emily skillfully countered each objection, Richard watched with a mixture of pride and admiration. In just 3 months, she had transformed from a desperate woman into a formidable leader. At 66, he found himself rethinking many of his old beliefs about leadership and business. After the meeting, Emily retreated to her office, the adrenaline of the presentation giving way to a familiar wave of doubt. Sitting in her chair, she caressed her prominent belly. "Am I doing enough?" she murmured to herself. Silent fast enough. The door opened softly and Richard entered. "Excellent work today, Emily," he praised, noticing her worried expression. "Something bothering you?" Emily hesitated before confessing her doubts. Richard listened attentively, then shared, "You know that when Michael was born, I was building this company. I constantly wondered if I was doing enough, as a father and as a leader." He paused, his gaze distant. "The secret, Emily, is to understand that change takes time, but every step counts, and you're making a real difference here." His words brought comfort, but were interrupted by the sound of an incoming email. Emily opened it, her face paling as she read. "What is it?" Richard asked, concerned. "An anonymous email," Emily replied, her voice tense. "It seems some of our unethical policies are still being practiced in certain departments." In the following days, Emily immersed herself in a personal investigation. She walked the halls of the company, talking to employees at all levels. What she discovered disturbed her deeply: a silent resistance to the new policies. Team leaders perpetuating the old toxic culture, fear among employees of reporting violations. Determined, Emily called an emergency meeting with Richard and the leadership team. The tension in the room was palpable as she presented her findings. "For this is unacceptable," declared Emily, her voice filled with indignation. "We need more drastic measures to ensure compliance." Michael, still struggling to redeem himself, tried to downplay some of the problems. "Maybe we're moving too fast. Cultural changes take time." Emily cut him off sharply. "Time is exactly what we don't have, Michael. Every day we allow these practices to continue, we are failing our employees." The tension reached its peak when Emily directly confronted Mr. Harding, a senior executive known for his resistance to change. "Mr. Harding, we have evidence that you actively sabotaged our new initiatives," Emily accused, her eyes flashing. Mr. Harding stood up, furious. "This is an outrage. I've worked at this company for 30 years. If this is how you're going to treat me, I'd rather resign." All eyes turned to Richard, waiting for his reaction. There was a moment of tense silence before he spoke. "Mr. Harding," Richard began, his voice calm but firm, "I accept your resignation, effective immediately." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Emily felt a wave of relief and gratitude for Richard's trust. In the days that followed, Emily implemented even more radical changes. A mandatory ethics training program for all employees was launched. An anonymous reporting system was established, and a public campaign of corporate transparency began to take shape. That night, Emily stayed late in her office, reviewing plans for the coming months. The task ahead was monumental, but she was determined to create a lasting impact. She felt a strong kick from the baby and smiled, placing her hand on her belly. "It's okay, little one," she whispered. "Mommy's building a better world for you." Standing up, Emily walked to the window. Outside, the city glittered, thousands of lights dotting the night. Each light represented a life, a story, and Emily was determined to ensure that every story within Bennett Enterprises was one of fairness, equality, and opportunity. The road ahead would be challenging, she knew, but looking at the illuminated city, Emily felt a surge of hope. Real change was possible, and she was just getting started. A year had passed since Emily accepted Richard's proposal. Now, standing before the mirror in her new apartment, Emily adjusted the blazer of her elegant suit. Her eyes, once marked by despair, now shone with confidence and determination. Beside her in a crib, her 3-month-old son slept peacefully. "Look at us, little one," whispered Emily, gently stroking the baby's cheek. "What a journey, huh?" Minutes later, Emily entered the crowded auditorium of Bennett Enterprises. Cameras flashed and reporters whispered eagerly. On stage, Richard Bennett, at 66, seemed more energetic than ever. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard began, his firm voice echoing through the auditorium. "Today, we're not just announcing corporate changes, we're admitting mistakes, acknowledging failures, and, most importantly, committing to a better future." He paused, his eyes scanning the audience. "And the architect of this transformation, our new COO, Emily Thompson." Emily took the stage, her presence immediately commanding respect. "A year ago," she began, I was unemployed, pregnant, and desperate. Today I'm here to show that change is possible, not just for individuals but for entire corporations. With precision and passion, Emily presented impressive employee satisfaction increased by 70%, productivity by 45%, and a drastic reduction in staff turnover. But numbers are only part of the story, Emily continued. Today, we announce revolutionary work-life balance policies, gender equality, and the launch of the Bennett Foundation for Business Ethics and Support for Working Mothers. The audience reacted with a mixture of surprise and admiration. The questions came fast and challenging. "How do you ensure these changes are sustainable?" questioned a skeptical reporter. Emily smiled, prepared. "Transparency and accountability. We have established clear, externally audited metrics. Every employee, from intern to CEO, is evaluated on their commitment to these values." Michael made a brief but impactful appearance. "I made mistakes," he admitted publicly, "mistakes that almost destroyed lives. Today, I am fully dedicated to correcting those mistakes and building a truly ethical company." After the conference, as Emily spoke with some journalists, a young intern approached timidly. "Ms. Thompson," she began, her voice trembling slightly, I just wanted to thank you. The new parental leave policies, they changed my life. Now I can have a family without sacrificing my career." Emily felt a lump in her throat, seeing in that young woman a reflection of herself a year ago. "That's what we're fighting for," she replied softly, "so that no one else has to choose between family and career." Later, in a private moment, Richard approached Emily. "You exceeded all my expectations," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "You transformed not only the company but me as well." Emily smiled, remembering their first encounter. "Thank you for the opportunity, Richard, for believing in me when I didn't even believe in myself." The celebration with the employees was a stark contrast to the cold corporate environment of a year ago. Genuine laughter echoed, diverse groups chatted animatedly, the spirit of camaraderie was palpable. Emily circulated among the groups, listening to stories of how the changes had impacted lives. In a brief speech, she emphasized, "This is just the beginning. The real work of transformation is continuous and requires the effort of each and every one of us." At the end of the day, Emily was in her office, rocking her son, who had been brought to the celebration. Looking out the window at the illuminated city, she reflected on the incredible journey of the past year. A soft ping announced the arrival of an email. It was an invitation to be the keynote speaker at a global conference on ethical leadership in business. Emily smiled, realizing that her personal struggle had transformed into something much larger. She was no longer just a woman fighting against injustice. She had become a symbol of change and hope for many. Looking at her sleeping son, Emily made a silent promise. To him, to continue fighting for a more just world. To herself, to never forget where she came from and the power of a second chance. And to all those who still faced injustice, to be a tireless voice and a force for change. Picking up her bag, Emily prepared to go home. As she turned off the lights in her office, symbolically closing a chapter of her life, she paused for a moment at the door. The city lights shone outside, each representing a life, a story, a possibility. Emily smiled, feeling ready for the next chapter of her journey. The future, once so uncertain and frightening, now seemed full of endless possibilities. With one last look back, Emily closed her office door and walked towards the elevator, her footsteps echoing in the silent hallway. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles to fight. But now, Emily knew she was ready to face them, not just for herself, but for all those who needed a voice, an example, hope. As the elevator doors closed, Emily made one last silent promise, to continue being the change she wanted to see in the world, one step at a time, one day at a time. And with that thought, she left the building, walking towards a future that finally seemed bright and full of promise.